Guest list heavy, big names abound. Academic and professional leaders, knowledge profound. Gary May, Robert Langer, Golden Sound. Podcast lit, wisdom's playground. Conversations rich, interviews bright. From MDs to artists, sharing insight. Chemistry vibe, conversations ignite. Steam dreams growing, future so bright. Chancellor May, Sidney Colley in the fold. MK Brown, Sheena Colley, stories told. Mike Zott, Robert Langer, wisdom gold. McCall Washington, young minds bold. Dr. Thomas N.G., Todd Golub, ignite. Abinaya Marcella, vision bright. Lesel Vincent, Sonola's insight. Michael Evans, cough under spotlight. Sarah Scrabalak, Nigella speak clear. Jake Desmond's vision future near. Mr. Bourne Kuna, Fortingo here. Darissa Ferguson, voices sincere. Guest list heavy, big names abound. Academic and professional leaders, knowledge profound. Gary May, Robert Langer, Golden Sound. Podcast lit, wisdom's playground. Conversations rich, interviews bright. From MDs to artists, sharing insight. Chemistry vibe, conversations ignite. Steam dreams growing, future so bright. LC Campo, Emery Brown's precision. Lynn Rashay Johnson brings thoughtful vision. Keshav Gavin transclinical mission. Dick Mann and Johansson research ambition. Louis Junheim, Trevor Johnson's art. And Pinder speaking from the heart. David Joshua Ferguson plays his part. Chadwin, Hanna, Vincent Miranda start. Greg Zuckerman writing from the Wall Street beat. Cordell Hardy's wisdom research elite. Kyle Woom, Forbes list ambition complete. Gabriel Galarza's insights repeat. Guest list heavy, big names abound. Academic and professional leaders, knowledge profound. Gary May, Robert Langer, Golden Sound. Podcast lit, wisdom's playground. Conversations rich, interviews bright. From MDs to artists, sharing insight. Chemistry vibe, conversations ignite. Steam dreams growing, future so bright. Dev Mandavia, corporate strategy bold. Jenai Burrows, medical stories unfold. Doreen Duncan's vision, Island City mold. Paul Boyer's lectures, stories retold. Omar Sharif Ali, software meta. Economic talks, making minds better. Pranav Dorbala, med school go-getter. Ging Rahim Bia, engineering trendsetter. Savni Kulkarni, Abbott structural heart. Farm D candidate, giving advice to start. Podcast guest list, masterful art. New Chemist podcast, playing art part. Guest list heavy, names renowned. Knowledge deep, esteem, vibes profound. Podcast flowing, innovation sound. Future so bright, keep dreams unbound.
Purpose of these episodes not at all for advice or medical suggestions. These are aimed to provide support to peer pharmacists in training in educational and intellectually stimulating ways. Again, these are not at all for medical advice or medical suggestions. Please see your local board and state-certified health professional. The views of this podcast represent those of my guests and I.
Welcome to the Chemist Podcasting Group's The Path to KOLs. We are so glad you're here. We discuss ideas, research in the chemistry of change, as well as the success stories of innovators and their social and transformative impact. Today, we have a special guest, Julio G. Martinez-Clark, a leading innovator in the clinical research arena, who bridges global quality standards with Latin America's burgeoning medtech ecosystem. As an ambassador of IAOCR, GCSA Americas, and CEO of bioaccess, Julio is at the forefront of facilitating accelerated regulatory approvals and cost-effective clinical trials across Latin America. We're so excited to have you here and to learn more about your journey and vision for healthcare innovation. So can I call you Julio or should I call you Mr. Clark?
Absolutely. Julio is fine.
Julio is fine? Okay, so Julio, what inspired your interest in clinical research and how did your early experiences shape your innovative approach?
Well, I came from another background. I graduated as an engineer. Went to the university in Bogota, Colombia, and I was trained as an electrical engineer, and then I got involved in the telecom and networking world or space, and I worked for a couple of big global companies, Nortel and Lucent. So technology has been always in my heart, always being involved with technology in one way or another. And I realized that I liked the business part of technology probably more than the technical part of it. So I got my MBA in Boston, and I moved from Colombia to the US many, many years ago. And I had my own path and my own career, and my brother in parallel, he went to medical school in Colombia, and he also moved to the US. He settled in Boston. He worked at a couple Harvard labs and doing research, basic research, and then he went to Case Western University, Cleveland, to do internal medicine, and then went back to Boston to do cardiology and then interventional cardiology at the Beth Israel Medical Center at the Harvard Medical School. And our paths, although they were separated, were parallel, we're moving in parallel, but we crossed our paths around 2010 because he moved to Miami right after his fellowship training at Harvard and became a professor at the University of Miami. And he started working with a lot of US medical device startups, working in advanced cardiovascular technologies. And he traveled all over Latin America, helping these companies do their first in human trials in different countries. Also Europe and of course in the United States, all over. He was involved in the design of the devices. He was involved in the preclinical animal testing of the devices and the actual first in human testing of the devices. So then one day he told me about what he was doing, and he said, Julio, I'm setting up a company outside of the university because there are many limitations inside the university, so I think it's good to have something outside, and there's a lot of need for these type of services. And he saw firsthand how these companies in the US struggle when they're ready to do a first in human trial. So that's kind of the origin story of bioaccess, and that's how I got involved in the operation of the company and leading the company since. We've grown to be a regional company. We have operations in many, many countries in Latin America, also Eastern Europe and Australia. And in essence, what we do is we help device companies do first in human trials, and also we have expanded to other spaces like biopharma, radiopharmaceuticals. But device trials are being our specialty for the past 50 years.
That's very good, Julio. Very good. So you successfully bridged healthcare, telecommunications, and venture capital. How has your diverse professional background contributed to your effectiveness in clinical research innovation?
Well, David, I think that who I am today and what bioaccess is today is a combination of my past experiences, my education, and Pedro's experiences. So kind of the universe kind of put us together, and I led a group of distributors for Lucent Technologies based out of Miami, and we have distributors all over Latin America, and I learned a lot from that experience. I was able to bridge technology, business, travel, extensive travel, which is really, really important for what bioaccess is doing now, because we are a regional contract research organization, so we have to navigate all these countries and kind of have a very broad mindset about Latin America. We first started in Colombia doing trials, but we expanded organically to other countries. So right now, for us, Latin America is like being one country, because we think very broadly about the region. So it's easy for me to go to Brazil or to go to Uruguay because it's already kind of embedded in my head. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it sounds good, Julio. It sounds good. So as an ambassador of IAOCR GCSA Americas, what drives your commitment to global standards, and why is this important for Latin America? So in terms of your work with IAOCR and GCSA Americas, how would you say that's driving your commitment, or how would you say that's influencing your work and practice now?
David, the issue that we notice in Latin America is that at the beginning of our work in the region is lack of credibility. We had to, because of the nature of our work, we needed to find investigators at hospitals that didn't have clinical research experience or didn't have proven experience, in other words. And we needed to find a way to train them. And I was also the president of the Colombian Association of Clinical Research. And I felt the need to standardize the training and somehow get a third party to certify the quality of the professionals and the quality of the sites. So I started my search for an international organization that had this certification and accreditation for professionals, a site certification and professional accreditation, which are two different things, related but different things. So I was fortunate enough to find this organization in the UK called the International Accrediting Organization for Clinical Research, and they have a certification for research sites called GCSA, and they have an accreditation for professionals. So meaning that they accredit the investigator, they accredit the site manager, they accredit the study coordinator, etc. And I was very happy to find out, because that was my way to ensure that the site we were dealing with as the credibility of clinical research in Latin America. So yeah, I embarked on a mission to promote this certification and accreditation, and I became their ambassador, and I've been helping them enter into Latin America and get more sites to adopt these standards.
Okay, so Chadwin, I'll let you chime in.
Yeah, I just wanted to state out, being from the medical device world and understanding the importance of translational medical devices and drugs from the preclinical space to clinical development, it's hard.
Yes.
And so many startups get stuck right there. You have a concept, you have a design, and then it's like, how do I get this into humans? So I really applaud the work that you and your company are doing to help that, and specifically in developing nations like LATAM and other nations through Europe. So how much growth have you seen in the startup world based on the work that you are doing, specifically in Latin American countries and other developing countries?
Well, first of all, let's start with the actual problem. And why is it that that U.S. startups go to emerging markets like the ones in Latin America for first-in-human trials? In the U.S., the way the system works, that are usually spin-offs of universities in the U.S. And they get funded through friends and family, through angel investors, and later through venture capital funds. But in the early stages, they struggle a lot raising funds and moving forward with the innovation. They build a team that is experienced, because they have to show credibility to potential investors, etc. And they do their preclinical testing in the US, usually. And once they're ready to validate the technology in humans. In the US, they face struggles like, for example, the high cost of medical procedures. We're talking about devices, PMA devices, pre-market authorization, class 3 devices, implantable devices, high-risk devices. So it's really expensive to do these procedures in the US. It's very, very risky. Patients can die because it's a device that hasn't been proven in a human setting yet. And the time it takes to get IRB approval in the US is long, and also FDA approval. And the red tape and the requirements from the FDA are extremely high. So a lot of these challenges force these companies to explore options overseas. Some of them, of course, they stay in the US for XYZ reason, but many of them go overseas, and that's the problem that we try to solve with bioaccess. Those companies that are seriously looking at doing trials overseas, bioaccess is one of their first options as a support group, as a contract research organization. So we've seen the growth exponentially. I mean, the more devices are in the market, the more opportunities we have. Although in the past year, to be quite honest with you and the audience, the investment sentiment has been difficult in the United States. Investors are not funding early stage companies at the rate they were funding those companies before. That we hope that will change. The service provider industry is waiting for a change in the tide, because eventually it will come back. It's just that the high interest rates, etc., they're making investors wait and change their investment strategies before deploying capital. So the point is that companies are going overseas. You see it in the news all the time. Some countries in Latin America, of course, are more popular than others. Some countries in Eastern Europe are more popular than others. There are even countries in Central Asia. Kazakhstan, for example, is a leading country that has become somewhat popular in the medical device first in human world, and also Australia and New Zealand. Australia and New Zealand particularly are important because especially Australia gives these companies a tax rebate of 43.5% back. So whatever money they invest in a clinical trial in the country, they get 43.5 back, which is good. However, it's far the time difference. So some companies may not see Australia as a good option because of those. But for many companies, startup companies, Australia is a good destination. Same in Latin America, Panama, Dominican Republic, Chile, Paraguay, and more recently, El Salvador.
So both David and I are originally from the Bahamas.
Yep.
Okay.
My question for you would be, how do you choose which countries you expand into? We talk a lot about the regulatory framework, or the non-existence of a regulatory framework for things such as clinical trials and drug development trials in the Bahamas. So how do you choose where to go, and how do you deal with some of these challenges, regulatory and governmental challenges, in expanding? Which countries you want to expand into, and how do you deal with the government lacks or the lapses in government and regulatory procedure in those developing countries?
Good question. Actually, this business or these industries like water, it flows where there is the least resistance. So for a US startup, they want to do trials easier, faster, and cheaper, right? That's the bottom line. Easier, faster, and cheaper. And my goal is to find them places, hospitals and countries where they can accomplish those three goals. And if you really think about it, it's really about time. Because time to approval, time to site activation, time to patient recruitment, and time is money. I mean, the more time I can save these companies, the more money they can save. The burn rate of these companies is extremely high, meaning every day they spend about $40,000-$50,000 just on salaries and expenses, etc. So every day is really crucial for these companies to have the device implanted on patients. So with that said, my job is to find them places where they can have these trials approved and get patients on an OR, operating room, really, really quickly. And you have to balance the time to approval with the patient recruitment potential of a country. So I've been doing this for about, we, bioaccess, have been doing this for about 20 years now, if you count the time that Pedro, my brother, started working at the University of Miami. So we already have a very good understanding of the region. We already have a good understanding of the time it takes to approve a clinical trial in all these countries, from Mexico all the way down to Argentina. All countries have a regulatory approval process. I mean, there's really no country that I know of that doesn't have regulatory approval process, government approval process, oversight of some sort. Some countries have, most countries have a sequential approval process where you first have to get IRB approval, and second you get government, National Ministry of Health approval. Just a few countries like Panama and Chile do not have national Ministry of Health approval, meaning that you just get IRB approval, Institutional Review Board ethics approval, and then you notify the Ministry of Health of the approval and the execution of the trial. So if the inclusion and exclusion criteria allows for recruitment in these smaller countries, those are the countries that we prefer. But if the inclusion and exclusion criteria is such that we need to move to a larger country because we're just not going to recruit patients on a small 4 million people country like Panama, then we have to explore larger countries like Colombia, like Brazil, like Mexico, right? So it really depends on what the
Yeah, this is good stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. Yeah.
Yeah, but you had something else you want to add?
Go ahead. No, you can go ahead.
Okay, sure. So, in terms of your work, what are your thoughts on the future of the clinical trial infrastructure in Latin America, particularly regarding sustainability? And what potential do you see for Caribbean nations like the Bahamas, if you could add that?
Yes, yeah. Last year, there were two announcements that made the news that are important or validate the importance of Latin America in the clinical research space. The first announcement was Velocity Research, which is the largest site network in the world, announced that they opened an office in Brazil, Sao Paulo, Brazil, to buy sites in, of course, in Brazil, and Mexico and Argentina. And there was another site network called Scope, if I remember correctly. They announced that they bought their second site in Brazil. And that, to me, validates the space where Latin America has become a very mature region for clinical research, advanced clinical research. And I see the news every day. We follow the news very closely, and we see approval after approval of these trials in the region. It's just that unless you're in the industry, you don't really know about these approvals, but they happen quite frequently. First in human trials in the region. The second part of your question about the Bahamas, I hear that the Bahamas have a pretty solid regulatory framework. I hear companies going to Bahamas, especially in the stem cell space. But I don't, for some reason, I don't hear first in human trials happening in Bahamas. At least with medical devices, and it's too bad. It's probably something that we could explore together. Yeah.
We're open.
Yeah, man. Yeah, keep me posted.
To continue in the conversation for sure.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, the stem cell infrastructure is definitely opening up a lot. There have been a ton of conferences, a ton of clinicians from Europe, from LATAM that are coming to the Bahamas, and we're developing regulatory strategy actively to ensure that they have the ability to do the research that they want to do. So I think the government is open to it, and they're open to expanding their healthcare infrastructure and research infrastructure in general.
Yeah, I agree. Sounds good. So as we start to wrap up, your podcast, Global Trial Accelerators, formerly known as LATAM MedTech Leaders, has a significant number of episodes. What motivated you to start this, and what has been the most rewarding aspect?
David, I started in the medical device and the clinical research industry, as I said at the beginning of the conversation, about 50 years ago. And of course, my brother started about 5 years earlier than that. And I came from another industry, as I said, telecom and networking, and I couldn't find much information about these topics. And that's why being on these podcasts help disseminate this information and educate newer founders that are looking to do first-in-human trials overseas. So I was in a position where I couldn't really study the industry. I couldn't find information about the industry, but I was pretty much forced to be a player in the industry because I needed to help my brother. I had a company to move forward, and I got on many calls with potential clients, and I learned so much on each call. And I also spoke with Pedro, my brother, and other physicians involved in this type of work. So I started kind of accumulating knowledge about the industry through word of mouth and conversations. And I said to myself, I should probably have a blog or of some sort where I can write about what I'm learning about the industry, because there's really no quality information to be found online. So I started blogging. I started an FAQ because I realized that a lot of our clients had the same questions. How do I import devices into a country? How do I get approval in Colombia? How do I get approval in Mexico? What are the steps? What are the requirements? Repetitive questions. So I started putting together this blog with FAQs and everything. And then one day, somebody found me online, the executive editor of a medical device publication called MedDevice Online. And he saw that I was posting interesting stuff about medical device trials on LinkedIn. And he invited me to be a guest columnist at MedDevice Online. So I wrote my first article. And since then, I've written probably 20-something articles. And one day, I was doing research for an article, and I couldn't find reliable information about much knowledge in their heads. And that knowledge was nowhere to be found. And my clients were making so many mistakes, especially my clients who were newer founders. A lot of PhD students become CEOs, new founders of startup companies, but they are great PhD students. I mean, but they're a PhD graduate, another thing is to be a CEO. So I said to myself, I should probably have a platform where I can speak with leaders of the industry almost on a weekly basis, and a podcast was the best platform. So that's really the genesis of LATAM MedTech Leaders that morphed into what is now Global Trial Accelerators.
So as we start to wrap up, Chadwin, you can ask another question. I have one more and then we'll conclude. But reflecting on your career, and what legacy or lasting impact do you hope to leave in the clinical research and healthcare innovation space?
David, we started the first in human, or we professionalized, in other words, the first in human medical device clinical trial business in Latin America. So we opened up an industry that wasn't really known in the region. It was happening, but nobody was really talking about it. Nobody was professional enough to be able to help these companies, these startup companies properly. And that was the first impact that bioaccess had in the region, and I'm very proud of it. However, the second big impact, and will probably be our legacy, is in the radiopharmaceutical first in human space. You may or may not know, but there is a huge bottleneck. 100 or 600 molecules in preclinical and clinical development, and there's just a handful of sites that are able to meet the needs of these, or meet the demand of these startups. So I think Latin America is a perfect destination where we can do radiopharmaceutical and theranostic research faster, easier, and cheaper than in the United States. And we are setting up the first advanced radiopharmaceutical and theranostic center program at a leading hospital affiliated with Mayo Clinic in Colombia as we speak. So that will make a breakthrough impact in the region, and it will set the stage for other programs to come, so that we can tackle the issue of the bottleneck in the radiopharmaceutical and theranostic research space.
Okay, sounds good. So thank you so much, Julio, for sharing your inspiring journey and vision with us today, me and Chadwin. Your groundbreaking work continues to drive healthcare innovation forward, benefiting diverse populations globally. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope you're inspired to pursue your passions and create meaningful and transformative impact on your community.
Purpose of these episodes not at all for advice or medical suggestions. These are aimed to provide support to peer pharmacists in training in educational and intellectually stimulating ways. Again, these are not at all for medical advice or medical suggestions. Please see your local board and state-certified health professional. The views of this podcast represent those of my guests and I.
Guest list heavy, big names abound, academic and professional leaders, knowledge profound. Gary May, Robert Langer, Golden Sound, podcast lit, wisdom's playground. Conversations rich, interviews bright, from MDs to artists, sharing insight. Chemistry vibe, conversations ignite, steam dreams growing, future so bright. Chancellor May, Sidney Colley in the fold, MK Brown, Sheena Colley stories told, Mike Zott, Robert Langer, wisdom gold, McCall Washington, young minds bold, Dr. Thomas NG, Todd Golub ignite, Abinaya Marcella, vision bright, Lesel Vincent, Sonola's insight, Michael Evans, cough under spotlight, Sarah Scrabalak, Nigella speak clear, Jake Desmond's vision future near, Mr. Bourne Kuna, Ford Tingo here, Darissa Ferguson, voices sincere. Guest list heavy, big names abound, academic and professional leaders, knowledge profound. Gary May, Robert Langer, Golden Sound, podcast lit, wisdom's playground. Conversations rich, interviews bright, from MDs to artists, sharing insight. Chemistry vibe, conversations ignite, steam dreams growing, future so bright. LC Campo, Emery Brown's precision, Lynn Rashay Johnson brings thoughtful vision. Keshav Gavin transclinical mission, Dick Mann and Johansson research ambition. Louis Jungheim, Trevor Johnson's art, and Pinder speaking from the heart. David Joshua Ferguson plays his part, Chadwin, Hanna, Vincent Miranda start. Greg Zuckerman writing from the Wall Street beat. Cordell Hardy's wisdom research elite. Kyle Woom Forbes list ambition complete. Gabriel Galarza's insights repeat. Guest list heavy, big names abound. Academic and professional leaders, knowledge profound. Gary May, Robert Langer, Golden Sound. Podcast lit, wisdom's playground. Conversations rich, interviews bright. From MDs to artists, sharing insight. Chemistry vibe, conversations ignite. STEAM dreams growing, future so bright. Dev Mandavia, corporate strategy bold. Jen I. Burrows, medical stories unfold. Doreen Duncan's vision, island city mold. Paul Boyer's lectures, stories retold. Omar Sharif Ali, software meta. Economic talks, making minds better. Pranav Dorbala, med school go-getter. Ging Rahim Bia, engineering trendsetter. Savni Kulkarni, Abbott structural heart. Farm D candidate, giving advice to start. Podcast guest list, masterful art. New Chemist podcast, playing art part. Guest list heavy, names renowned. Knowledge deep as skiing, vibes profound. Podcast flowing, innovation sound. Future so bright, keep dreams unbound.